All right, welcome to part 1, in which we will take a tour of Google Classroom's features and tools. Let's start by looking at the Classes page. This is the first page we see when we navigate to Google Classroom. In the center, we see all of the classes that we're teaching or that we're enrolled in as students. Apologies in advance to the math teachers. I am not a math teacher, but I am pretending to be one. At the top left is the Classroom menu, where we can navigate to other pages, including our classes, the to-do list, the settings. We'll be exploring those later in part 3. At the top right, we can access our Google account, and we can join or create a new class. So let's go ahead and hit that plus button to make a new class. Students will hit join class, but we'll get to that a little later. I'll hit create a class, and we'll be asked to put in some basic information. For the name, I think it's good to have a school-wide naming convention for classes that includes the teacher's name, especially at higher grade levels where students have more teachers. The section, my school uses the class period as the section, but follow your school's protocol here. For the subject, Classroom actually suggests subjects as I type, but I tend just to write music for mine since none of the suggestions really describe my class. Classroom will also pick a background and theme for your Google Classroom page based on what you type here. And finally, I'll put in the room number. All right, so here's the home page of the class we just created. The very first thing I want to point out is the class code displayed here. You can also find it under the settings page. Your students will use this code to join your class. Let me show you the student's perspective. So here's Michaela's classes page. She's one of my students. She'll click the plus button just like we did, but she'll select join a class in the classroom. I'd be projecting the code on the board, and students like Michaela will enter it like this. And now she's in my math class. I'll head back to my teacher account now. And actually, the first thing I'm going to do now that I have a student is head over to my settings and make it so that only teachers can post in the class stream. Otherwise, we'll have total chaos. Now back to the stream. So we're looking at the stream page, which is essentially the home page for the class, the first thing that students and teachers see. At the very top of the page, I can see tabs for the 3 other pages of this Google Classroom, which we'll explore soon. The main banner shows the class name and section that we set earlier, as well as the class code. And the image in the banner is chosen based on the subject we chose for our class. You can change and customize it here if Google got it wrong. Here, we can post announcements that appear at the top of the stream. Right now, my stream is empty, but as I post, it'll show announcements, and optionally, I can set it to show notifications for new assignments and materials. We'll control those in the settings, and I'll be talking about that in much greater detail in part 3 of this tutorial. But for now, think of the stream kind of like a non-algorithmic Twitter or Instagram. It shows the teacher's most recent activity at the top, and then it descends in reverse chronological order. Moving on, we have the classwork page, which is where we'll be posting assignments and materials. Next, we have the people page, which shows teachers and students enrolled in the class. You can invite co-teachers and subs here as well. And you can also invite students by their email addresses, although it's really much easier to just give them the classroom code. Functionally, this page is really for communicating with students and parents and guardians. A really great feature of the people page is the invite guardians option. My school has the homeroom teachers invite the guardians or the parents of their students, and once the parent has confirmed by email, they become associated with that student in every classroom that the student joins. So every teacher who has that student in a Google Classroom can email the parents or send out bulk emails to parents. All emails sent from the people page get sent as blind carbon copies, so recipients can't see each other, which is a really great feature for emailing parents. You can also remove students from your class if their schedule changes or something. Finally, we have the grades page, which unsurprisingly will be our gradebook. Any assignment we have posted in classwork will appear here with the point value that we assigned. And just so you know, in this screenshot, I've switched to a different Google Classroom where I had already made some assignments. In the one that we just made, it would look like this. It would be empty. We can put in the grade right here and then return the assignment to show the student their grade, or we can select View Submission to open the student's work in the Google Classroom grading tool, which I'll be looking at in much greater detail in part 2 of this tutorial. So let's start posting on Google Classroom. The first thing we're going to post is an announcement. So I can type here, and I can also attach things. I can attach files from my Google Drive, from my computer, or I can include hyperlinks or links to YouTube videos in the announcement. All posts on Google Classroom can be posted immediately. When I click here, they can also be saved as drafts for posting later, or I can even schedule them to post automatically at a later time. You can also reuse announcements you've posted previously, even from other Google Classrooms, which is kind of cool. So let's go onto the classwork page and post some actual work. We'll click that Create button and we'll be presented with 6 options: assignment, quiz assignment, question, material, reuse post, and topic. I'm actually going to start by creating 2 topics: do nows and homework. Now we see the subheaders appear on the page, and we'll also see them populate our table of contents here on the left. So now we have some structure, and students can walk into class and click the Do Now header to see my most recent Do Now post, or when they're at home, they can click the Homework header so their view isn't cluttered by the Do Nows. Let's make an assignment. I'll give the assignment a name and some instructions. I'll set the point value, I'll set a due date, and since this is homework, I'll set that as the topic. I'm not going to discuss rubrics, but this is a really great new feature of Google Classroom that I really encourage you to explore on your own. Now, I could assign this as is, like if the homework were on paper, the students would do it and hand it in, and I could just use this post to grade it because the assignment gets a column in the gradebook. However, I'm going to actually attach a Google Doc for them to work in. I could create one here, but I've already made it, so I'll just hit Add. And just like the announcement from earlier, I can choose from these attachment options, and the assignment is in my Google Drive. The next feature here is one of my favorites in Google Classroom. If I click here, I'll see 3 options for how students can access the attachment. The first option makes it view only for them, so they can see it, but they can't do anything to it. The next option gives all the students editing privileges on the same document, which can be interesting, but you really need to establish clear expectations around editing since you're letting a big group of kids loose on a single shared document. I've had kids edit or delete each other's work and even erase the entire document before, so set expectations. Finally, the last option is to make a new copy for each student, which is the one I'm going to pick. This creates a new copy of the document for every student enrolled in the class that they can edit and that automatically attaches itself to the assignment as their work for me to review. And this is really useful. So let me show you what it looks like for my students' accounts. Here, Michaela is opening up the homework and doing it. Here's Gabe doing the same. So you can see that each student gets their own copy of the assignment with their name right in the title, and Michaela's work doesn't affect Gabe's document or mine. Michaela's going to submit the assignment, but Gabe is a little farther behind, and he's not actually going to finish. We'll be reviewing these assignments in part 2 of this tutorial. For now, let's head back to the teacher page and see what has changed. So if I click into the assignment, I can see that Michaela has submitted it, and I can even see a thumbnail showing a preview of her work. And I can also see that Gabe hasn't submitted his work, and I can see from the preview that he hasn't finished. I can also see this information on the grades page. Let's move on and create a quiz assignment. These require a little more work on the front end, but they can grade themselves automatically, so they're simpler once they're deployed. All the settings are the same as a regular assignment, but Google Classroom has automatically created a quiz-style Google form for us, which will grade itself when students take it. And if I click here to enable grade importing, we'll be able to import the students' grades into our grades page once they take the quiz, and we can see their responses too, which is really useful. Setting up Google Forms as quizzes is beyond the scope of this tutorial, but it's well worth looking into. There's lots of power there, and given how well these quizzes integrate with Classroom, they can really make your life easier when it comes to grading. All right, let's move on and make a question assignment. These are the simplest types of assignments that students can interact with. Basically, you'll write your question in the title, and the students will answer it right in their Google Classroom. You'll see their answer right on your Google Classroom. This isn't really a substitute for a quiz, since you can only make 1 question per post, but they do make good do-nows as long as you curate them and don't leave up old questions, and we'll talk more about that in part 3 of the tutorial. The next type of classwork we can post is a material, which is just a file or a Google Drive folder that our students may reference, but they can't edit. Just like our other posts, we can attach files or links. However, materials don't appear in the gradebook, and we can't set a due date or point value for grading because they're not assignments. We also can't give students editing access or make copies. This is really just for reference, and I suggest making a separate topic for materials on your classwork page so they don't get confused. Finally, the last option, to reuse post, lets us repost a piece of classwork we've posted previously, even from a different Google Classroom. So for instance, if I thought my math support students could benefit from more practice with that homework from math class, I'll just go in and reuse the homework post. But once I pull it up, I can edit the settings. So maybe I want to change the title because in math class it was homework, but now it's classwork. Before moving on to part 2, I want to just quickly point out one great feature, which is that when we make any kind of post on Google Classroom, anywhere, including announcements and materials, we can choose to send it to only certain students if we want, which can be great for differentiation. We can also send it to multiple classes at once, which is really useful if you teach more than one section of something.